Hey everyone, welcome back to episode 3 of Woodland Acres. Got a pretty interesting episode, I think, for you today. No time lapses, only 2 big updates, and a lot to talk about in each of those updates. It's been a busy couple weeks. I think I've gotten a lot done. It might not. It didn't feel like it until I was about ready to record this, and I went back to this initial park file, and then I was like, oh yeah, I guess I got more done than I thought. So it's really exciting today. We dropped the car ride down a little bit lower. We built the station and themed all of this part of the car ride. Did some terrain work over here, did complete custom supports of the lift hill, all the theming for the car ride through here and back here. And we had a real think about what we're going to do about this park. So without further ado, let's jump into the first update, and I will talk about our future plans here. But before we do that, let's look in the first update and see what the park's looking like in this first update. Okay, so here we are in the first big update of this episode. Definitely looks a little different than the last image we saw of the coaster. It's now custom supported, at least the lift hill is. I decided I wasn't going to custom support the rest of the layout because there just wasn't enough room. And it's so close to the ground and the other scenery that you don't really notice the supports as much. Whereas on the lift hill, I think the custom supports really add to it because they really push that realism, push that old school classic looper look to it. And the other big thing here that I've done is raise the terrain, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, underneath the lift hill to sort of give that appearance that it's maybe not as high, that it's a little more grounded in with its environment, a little more disguised in the background. And I think I'm really happy with it. I think it's looking exactly how I pictured. I just love that the look of those supports kind of up against the hillside there, and the way the coaster kind of drops down the terrain. I think that creates a really cool effect, both from off-ride and on the ride. And then the car ride has seen a few changes here, so we did lower it, as I mentioned, and it now enters a tunnel and goes through the terrain, which I think is a really fun feature of the car ride. Quite the excavation there to get the ride to go all the way through and around the coaster. But yeah, we'll say they figured out a way to do that within budget. So as we come through here, there's this really fun kind of panoramic shot. As you're coming across the bridge, you see the car ride interacting with the environment, interacting with the coaster, right as it kind of comes down the main drop here. I think that's a really cool shot. If we kind of stop right here, I think that's really fun, just seeing the first drop kind of rip down the terrain right past the car ride. So we've continued the terrain work all the way around here. Continued to use that TMTK rock that we used over by the lighthouse. Just trying to kind of reuse those assets in a few different areas to sort of blend it all together. So here's where the car ride comes out of that tunnel and enters back into the rest of the area here, which this will all be finished in the last update of this episode. We've also continued to kind of flesh out the car ride here, and added these walls to sort of separate it from the coaster with some don't die fencing. I think this was sort of the turning point for me. Here, I'm going to jump out of Tejicam. When it comes to the car ride, this was the turning point for me that really started to convince myself of what this is going to look like. Adding these walls in and just sort of framing it out, starting to work on this custom curbing, adding a little scene here, starting to put in the trees. That was really for me when I started to kind of see the vision of what this was going to look like. And you'll get to see all that here shortly. So I think this was really fun. It's so simple. It's just a couple pieces. Well, it's actually a lot of cattail pieces, but it's a couple of types of pieces used. The cars, some wheels, and the cattail, and it just looks so fun with the personality of this scene. It's just I think it's great. It's that classic humans versus nature combining together in a total disaster for that car. This bridge here, you'll get to see what that looks like. And yeah, so I think before we look in the final update, I do want to touch on the future of the park and where we're going to go with this. I want to finish it, and by that I mean it's not going to be the park I originally thought it would be, and that's okay. I want to cut out the areas I'm not going to be able to finish so that we can have a kind of polished, finished park. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to say goodbye to this log flume. It was kind of an eyesore anyway. We're going to expand this lake around here. We're going to cut off the path here, and we're going to say goodbye to our whole like dwarven elephant area. I'll keep this around until the very end, and then right before we publish the final park, I'll save a copy of it and then clear all this out, make it into another big lake, and we'll just fill it all in with nature. With that kind of out of the way, there's really not a whole lot of episodes left. We're going to have one more for this area. We'll probably have one for this connecting area, and then we might have one more for sort of some of these last tidbits in this part of the park. And maybe that won't even be an episode. We'll see. We'll see how far I get and how much time I have, and we'll finish the parking lot, and that'll pretty much be it. So I definitely feel like it's achievable in a month, and the end is in sight, which gets me excited to kind of cap it off. And I do think it makes sense, honestly. You have a classic Woody, a classic Looper, a Boomerang, and then your kind of high budget last edition terrain coaster. So I think that kind of fits in with the history of the park. And I'm okay with getting rid of all this stuff. I mean, this was a lot of fun. This was a fun project, but maybe I'll do something like this in Planet Coaster 2 and carry on the vision there. So let's jump into the final update, where you can see how this really all fleshes out and all the details, and we'll talk through what we got there. And here we are in the final update of episode 3. I've got everything running. I've got the coaster going with all the test dummies. I got the car ride opened. The car ride is, I'm going to say, finished. And let's just kind of walk through everything here. This is a pretty big update compared to the last one. Quite a lot of scenery work was done here. So let's start right here. Actually, the last thing I built, but this will be some sort of plaza. There's going to be a sign here, and this will be the sign that sort of, greets you and brings you into the area. So maybe I'll say Pine Lake or something like that. And this was just like a last minute kind of random ad. This was so much fun. It just fits perfectly straddles the car. I think that it just fits this little spot so nicely. I was kind of toying with this area for a while, trying to think of what do I want to put here. I thought about like flowers or just trees or rocks, or I didn't want to totally block this sight line because I wanted the coaster lift hill here to be visible in the background, but I did want there to be some focal point, both for the guest off the ride and for the people on the car ride. You'll see I switched to the vintage cars as well. So some of this is going to be modified a little bit as I work through this area, but you get the idea of what we were going for here. This is the covered bridge that the cars go across. Very dilapidated. Is that the right word? I hope so. I wanted this to look like you have the wood, some kind of moldy, mossy wood with some, maybe green growth algae of some kind on it, and then you have like your brand new wood that's been patched on to try to keep some of the rain out. So that's the idea of the different colors there. Just a lot of pillar work in here. This is like really standard, classic, rustic covered bridge vibes. Even this moss on the bottom, just to add a little more character to it. We talked about this car scene in the swamp. We talked about this tunnel. Not much going on in here. It's pretty plain. Goes all the way through. We'll take it for a zoom. And as they come out the other side, you kind of enter the second half of the ride here, and what we call Welcome to Oldie Towns. So this was basically just me opening up the scenery menu and typing in Western, and then using as many pieces as I could. So I'd actually never done like a classic Western build in Planet Coaster, so this was really fun, just throwing the pieces down and seeing what we could make out of it. It came together really fast. So these are just some simple facades. They're going to be just to separate the ride from whatever we have happening on this side. So just some simple, we got a little jail here, we have a saloon, we have the rodeo inn, and I know it's a little bit offbeat from the theme of this whole kind of area. I talked about New England kind of feeling, and we're just going to say that, the park wanted to do something for this car ride, so they just put together some really cheap, although this is quite a bit extensive theming, but they just threw together some classic Western stuff to kind of make the car ride have a personality. So I'm okay with it. And it's in the car ride only, and it's not visible from the rest of the area. So I think that's what kind of allows me to do it in my mind. So that was fun. And then as we kind of work back around here, we'll take a look at the boarding station for the car ride. So we're calling it Lakeside Cruisers, and pretty simple here. This is really just the windows as walls technique. The reason I did that is I wanted to make these kind of cutouts on the backside. So it's a pretty simple building, essentially just a big shed. We did cover up the operator in here, made it look like they have their own little room. Just some trim work up above, or beam work I should say. And yeah, just kind of have these little arches kind of repeated on all sides. Kind of gives it like an open, airy feeling, which I kind of like. It's obviously a covered building, but it also feels like it's not, like it's placed in its surrounding area. So you have sort of this like plaza we had talked about in the last update, just with some theming now kind of thrown in here. Just your classic, your tires and sacks and barrels and crates and all the clutter that we all love to use in this game. That continues around here. We've got sort of the details finalized on this little like pier area, and then the car ride comes back full circle to where we started. Kind of weird that I started the tour in the middle of the car ride and then did the full circuit. Maybe it would have made more sense to start actually at the beginning of the ride, but oh well. So yeah, so this is done. This is what we got here, and I think it turned out fantastic. I'm a big fan. I used the same cover that I had used over here. I just repeated it for both the car ride cover and for this little awning cover that comes off the exit of the ride, and I'm okay with that. Oh, and I used it here as well. Just some consistency. It makes sense they would use the same materials and stuff when they're building this area. So to me that makes sense. A lot of this episode really was just like nature, rock work, bushes, trees, that kind of stuff, just adding in some like overgrown stuff here. I did kind of block this part of the coaster off with rock work. I see this one needs to be lowered slightly, and just to sort of keep the coaster engaging with the car ride, but not intruding too close. They kind of have their own separate areas here. And just for safety too, I was trying to keep in mind, like, if someone were to just get up off this ride, we wouldn't want them just running over to the coaster. So this probably needs like more legitimate fencing, but it just looked bad, and I didn't want it to look terrible. So instead, we're gonna use this tall rock work and sort of create that natural barrier, which I think it's better than nothing. So yeah, I think that's everything. Yeah, we talked about the terrain in the last update here. So we've got the car ride that comes around under the bridge in this little area, through the tunnel, through our little western village, and then back to the station. So I'll end with some cinematics here. Thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode. This has been really fun, just kind of sharing this park as we go with you guys, and kind of helps motivate me to finish it all off. So we'll see you guys in episode 4. Have a great whatever you're up to, and we'll talk soon. Bye bye.